So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another replay battle, and this, well, it was going to be something a little bit different today, but unfortunately, due to technical issues, I had to abandon that for the time being, although hopefully we'll be seeing a little bit of that next week. But this does give me an opportunity to showcase the Siege of Dale that I've been sitting on for the past week immediately, so that's something which is good. And I don't think I've ever actually done a siege on Dale before, or at least if I have, it was quite some time ago, and it might have been a different version of it. So we'll just have a quick look at Dale as a whole, and it is quite reminiscent of the standard city battles in Medieval 2, only there are a few more structures which are a little bit more impressive, and it is handmade, so there are sort of bits and pieces which are a little bit more involved, so there's a bit more in terms of terrain than there would be in a standard Medieval 2 map, where most of them tend to be quite flat. A little bit more in terms of these side streets over here. There is a lot of surface area for the defenders to cover, particularly seeing as there's only 3 armies worth of them rather than 4. So it will be interesting to see, and we will have 1 Kingdom of Men, 1 Kingdom of the Dwarves, and 1 Kingdom of the Elves defending today. But first of all, we'll go through the attackers, because they are just a raid, and I won't have to go into defensive positions with regards to them. We'll start off with Thick Dick, playing as Umbar, and he's got some Abrazanim Nadu Tariq in with the siege towers. He's also got some Corsair infantry without the armour upgrade, just in behind these siege towers, of course, to prevent them from being shot by the arrows on the approach. He's also got some Corsair Savages pushing the ram. Now, they'll do very badly under arrow fire approaching the gate, but as soon as they get inside, their AP could be handy against 2 of the defending armies. He's also got some more Abrazanim, the Nadu Bawib, very, very good at engaging in skirmish fights because of how resilient they are. They also make very good makeshift heavy infantry, of course. And it is worth saying as well that I've had to turn the graphics down, as I usually do on a battle of this scale nowadays, because otherwise it would just crash on load. I had a couple of those dealing with this battle as well. So, unfortunately, well, actually, now that we're in the game, can I turn the texture detail up? No, I cannot. Oh. So unfortunately we're just going to have to deal with some slight blurring, but it's better than crashing constantly, I suppose. More Abrazanim Nadu Bawib, and then over here, this is actually not the General's bodyguard today, but he does have some Naru Naaru Royal Guard. That mud texture is really ugly. But yeah, obviously very good spear archer hybrid, multiple HP. Very good in the late game, I've noticed. And then back here, we have some of the Castamir's Legion. Obviously, most of the time they make up the centrepiece of the Umbar line, because they are so effective at going into those frontline engagements. Very, very strong. One of the strongest frontline troops that you can mass up to this extent in the game. Possibly the strongest, if you consider you can have 4 of them. You know, that does mean that they outnumber the likes of the Guardians of Khan Doom and the Earls of Esgaroth. Although the Elves might have a few units that have something to say about that as well. We've also got the other Abrazanim unit, the Narduzagar, not AP, but very skillful. Again, could be very useful against one of the defending armies in particular. We've also got some Belagaya Halberds over here, just a single unit, but again, the AP polearms will come in very handy. Not AP polearms, but very, very good pikemen, the Naru Naaru Sentinels, possibly one of the strongest pikes in the game at this current moment in time. The additional shield value really helps them out. They are essentially a much more elite version of the Rudauer Franadine pikemen. And then finally, our Farazon the Golden is going to be riding with the Warlords of Umbar, so a knight unit. Interesting pick. If they can get into the city and start running around, they could prove to be a real nuisance. But that is sort of dependent on Umbar managing to punch a hole in the enemy line and allowing their cavalry to do so. Or perhaps one of his allies. We'll go up over here to this army, which is Stewed Balrog, who is playing as Rudauer. Obviously less armoured than Umbar. Oh god, that ground texture is appalling. But, you know, they are very good on the attack, very good AP values, very good base attack values all round. These 2 units of Franadine Berserkers have stats that you would expect to see on a 2-handed axe unit with their AP and very high attack and charge values, but they also have axe throwing capabilities and a shield. So a very, very good all-around unit, which make up for the weaknesses of that kind of unit that you would see elsewhere. Obviously, Rudauer Swordsmen, they make up the bread and butter of the Rudauer line. They're not fantastic on their own, but having said that, they are still pretty decent for their price point. There are quite a lot of them, and the numbers are quite necessary when you play as Rudauer to hold your army together. More shielded pikes in the Franadine pikemen over here. Very, very, very good. Very much a glue that holds Rudauer's infantry line together in a field battle in particular. But in this sort of situation, they can perform very well as well. Obviously, the choke points a situation in which Rudar can find themselves hemorrhaging their numbers quite quickly. The Franadine pikemen will help mitigate that somewhat. Obviously a catapult to help bring down the walls over here, perhaps even go after the gate. Some Rudar clansmen, so again, very low attack on these units, but they do have a good shield value and pretty good defensively, but obviously I think they only have an attack of 1, which is like the lowest it can possibly be. But obviously they do make up a pretty good chaff unit for Rudar. Now in the back over here, a little bit further away, we can see the Witch Realm with the Slavers, very, very good. Obviously the General is going to be rolling with these guys today. Good AP, multiple HP shock troops. They are few and far between, and Rudar have one of them. There are bound to be some hidden units around here for Rudar, I would imagine. I can't imagine they've not brought the Franadine Rangers in a situation like this. More clansmen, more swordsmen, and some Edinmore's Troll Hunters, which again, personal favourite of mine. Heavily armoured spearmen in melee, and obviously very effective javelins at range. Now we shall have a look over here at Angmar, played by Saucy Pants. We have... You know what to expect from Angmar for the most part. We do have some Witch Realm pikemen. Now the Barrow Wights, we saw them perform very effectively in the Thranduil's Halls battle not so long ago, and they are fantastic in this sort of situation, because if you cannot bring them down quickly, they can be a real thorn in your side, and the easiest way to bring them down is with a cavalry charge. And oftentimes the defenders are quite happy to sit back and let the attackers come to them rather than sallying out, so the Barrow Wights are a pretty safe pick most of the time actually in a siege battle like this, and they'll be very difficult to get rid of. We also have some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, obviously far less durable than the Barrow Wights, but still a very good attacking unit. Unsurprising to see the Guardians of Khan Doom, they do have their rusted armour effects here, but still they're going to be very, very good for the most part. Holding together the line, they also inspire the nearby troops around them, so that's going to be important for the lower tier orcs. Some more pikemen, they have formed up a box to prevent, actually, with some Angmar halberds at the back, prevent any sort of cavalry sallying out, which is interesting to see. Perhaps Angmar was expecting that. Some more Angmar halberds, they've also got some Snaga Stalkers, they've got some Trolls of Gundabad, more Guardians of Khan Doom and more Witch Realm units. They've gone for mostly quality actually, which is something you see quite a lot from Gundabad lately, I think. They do have some chaff of course with the halberds and the Snaga Stalkers, but for the most part they've invested a lot in their quality, which is understandable because Angmar's quality units are very, very good indeed. And then finally, the General's... not the General's Bodyguard? I don't see it. So we have the Witch Realm Blackguard, regardless, obviously very, very strong heavy infantry unit. Where is the General? Well, I guess we'll find out as the battle goes along. The final attacking army, however, it looks like they've spread out a little bit more. We have another Angmar army, actually, so we have some Orc fellas over here, and it looks like, based on how much they've spread out, they're intent on storming the walls immediately, which is interesting considering his allies are a little bit further back. Some Snaga Stalkers at the front. Some Guardians of Khan Doom, they actually have the armour upgrade. They've got their jet black and their fur cloaks. And over here we have more Barrow Wights obviously pushing the ram up as well, so they will take very little damage on the approach because of their multiple HP. I think they've got 3 or 4 HP actually. Angmar Marauders, so again a lot more chaff. Snaga Stalkers and more Angmar Marauders, so they're going to be putting the ladders up, and then hopefully we'll see Angmar follow through on this attack with these multiple units of upgraded Witch Realm units. And the Blackwatch Legion, so a very good pushing unit, hopefully they'll be pushing through the gate. And they have the Hammer Guard and the Witchers, so the Hammer Guard over here, obviously another AP shock troop, very, very deadly. And then we have some Witch Realm Inquisitors back here, which is going to be the general for this army. We do have the Witch King, but he doesn't actually count as a general, it's that lad in the back with the big spiked mace. And then we have the Witches of Angmar, obviously very good, provided they go unnoticed. And then some more Trolls of Gundabad. So, now we shall have a look at the defenders and see how they've set up. So over here they have spread out a little bit more, expecting Angmar to attack immediately, which is understandable. So Master Blaster, who sent me the replay, is going to be playing as the Dwarves of Erebor. Some Dwarven miners here ready to get up on the walls. Traditionally they are, you know, militia tier shock troops, but they should do a decent job against the lower tier of orcs. But over here we do have some Erebor legionaries as well, which of course are very, very strong. They are not the base level Dwarven unit, the level just above that, so they cost around the 900 mark, so you can put them in the same bracket in many ways as the Guardians of Khan Doom or the Castamir's Legion as a kind of unit, which is more expensive but is going to get you a lot more kills on the front line. Ironfoot Spears and Ironfoot Halberds together, so they've got the mass and the AP phalanx, which is going to be difficult for Angmar in particular to break through unless they use their Blackwatch Legion. Similar story on this side, and they do also have some Linden units from Tangerine over here, who has got some Harlinden infantry backing them up, which makes up for the weakness of the dwarves very well. Highly skilled, less armour, but they should be able to deal with some of the more skillful units. In particular, any AP units like the Orc Fellas will get butchered by the Harlinden infantry. Some more Dwarven miners, so again a very wide defence over here, Erebor legionaries. phone calls at inopportune times, but getting back to it, we have a ballista over here, a high elven ballista, which is in a weird place. It's right next to the wall. I imagine it's going to fall back at some point into the town centre. The town centre is actually slightly raised up, so the ballista might have some decent shots without inflicting any friendly fire, which would be a big boon for the defenders, particularly considering the attackers do have a catapult in the wings. Some 4 Linden archers over here from Linden, of course, so a cheaper archer force, in addition to some upgraded Ironfoot warriors, so some armour upgrades on these guys, and they are going to be backing up the Mithlond pikemen, which obviously the Mithlond pikemen are the level above the 4 Linden ones. 4 Linden marines as well, so spearmen, javelin hybrids, very, very effective. Obviously Linden's javelins have been a point of debate for quite some time, but they are obviously very, very effective at what they do. More 4 Linden archers, and then just back here we can see some Ironfoot crossbows. So let's see what's going on here in the north. We'll go to the town centre last, because I imagine that's where the cream of the crop is lying. We have CPT Gervais, who is going to be playing as Dale, so he's got some Dalian spearmen. Obviously they're going to be defending Dale. Over here we have a rather interesting little keep in the corner, although I imagine it's uninteractable as far as going through that gate and camping in here is concerned. We have some Dalian marksmen who have sort of bunched themselves up on the wall over here. But it's going to be an interesting sort of... There are some interesting angles with regards to the walls over here, so I wonder how that's going to work out. And we have some Bardian marksmen who have the armour upgrade, and I love the armour upgrade for the Bardian marksmen, makes them look very cool indeed. And some Earls of Esgaroth, and they're going up against Rudauer, which is interesting actually. I would have expected Linden would quite fancy going up against Rudauer, considering Rudauer's more heavy focus on AP. But the Earls of Esgaroth should be able to do the business against the Rudauer swordsmen, but I would be worried about them against the Cranodyne Berserkers. Now the Barding Herd are AP, which again is maybe not the best trait to have against Rudauer, but they should still be able to hold most of the forces at bay, but again the Cranodyne pikemen can outrange them. We've got some Swordmasters of Karnan, which is the kind of unit which Rudauer don't like facing, very highly skillful two-handed Swordmaster units, which of course can very good against lightly armoured targets, which Rudauer's army is largely made of. More Earls of Esgaroth, and then we've got some Lake Town infantry with some more Bardian marksmen, and then finally the force facing off against the more cautious of the two Angmar armies. We've got some Harlinden Guard on the walls from Linden, Noldorin Guard as well, one of the finest Linden infantry units of course, not multiple HP, but their stats are fantastic. And they've got some 4 Linden pikes over here, and more Noldorin Guard, so it looks like Linden is taking the bulk of the responsibility over here. Mithlond Swordmasters and 4 Linden Marines, a little bit of a lighter force over here, but then this Angmar army is deployed further back, so maybe they feel as though they can get some more value elsewhere. And then finally, here in the town centre, I would imagine we're going to see quite a lot of higher tier units, including some Ironfoot crossbows, which are going to be very useful with their AP missiles, of course. Sons of Durin, that AP is going to be potentially exceptionally useful in the late game against some of the Umbar and Angmar elites. And of course the Wardens of Alos Tyrian, which are pretty damn difficult to bring down in melee for lower tier units, but obviously the main event there is going to be their body piercing projectiles. Morroquendi pikes over here, which again another very, very strong pike unit, as well as some Morroquendi bows. Blackshot Dragon Slayers and AP Archer, so yeah, this is really the cream of the crop for the defenders in here. Girian's Paladins, Dalian Royal Guard, a Catapult is back here for the Dwarves as well, so that's going to be a multi-shot one. Blacklock Engineers, which are body-piercing, armour-piercing crossbowmen. They are brutally effective, but they're also very expensive, so you do need to be careful with them. In a field battle, they can be a little bit more risky, but in this situation, very, very strong. Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, and then finally another unit of Wardens of Alos Tyrian. So they've doubled up on some of these units, but understandably so. Without further ado, though, let's begin. This actually isn't an overly long battle, considering it's a large-scale siege, but then this is a more open siege. Once you get over the walls, I imagine the defenders are going to fall back to the safety of the town centre pretty quickly. It is rather large, but some of the streets you wouldn't expect to be used in a defensive capacity. But unsurprisingly, it looks as though FFA Muffins is going to be the one to move in first of all. Definitely the attacker which set out their stall most aggressively, you would have to say. There goes the horns, and you can see that Tangerine is sort of moving some of their forces at this point, and in particular I would suggest that the Ballista is going to be wanting to get out of here as quickly as possible. On the off chance they do get caught, they really don't want to lose this Ballista too quickly. Now you can see the towers beginning to chip away at the attacking armies as they move forward. Once upon a time, of course, these towers were utterly ridiculous, but little can be done about that, and the defenders are often outnumbered, so they will need the towers to do a bit of work, you would imagine. Meanwhile over there, that Angmar army is still completely static. This Umbar force is not moving. Rudauer is beginning to move some of their units, but I'm actually a little bit surprised that there's so little movement from Angmar and Umbire. As the attackers, you need to attack all at once and stretch the defenders. If you allow the defenders to gang up on one army in particular, then that's not a good thing to do. If you see one, even if you don't agree with attacking so aggressively, if you see one of your teammates doing this, you need to move with them. You know, it's because if you leave them to die in the end, that's going to be worse for you. Ugh. Meanwhile, there are some Guardians of Khana Dûm holding one of these ladders, so it's not just a token force that Angmar has sent forward. I mean, a lot of these units are lower tier, but this is a good amount of surface area that Muffins is covering. Interestingly enough, it's actually a bit of a mismatch over here. The Snaga are going up against the Erebor Legion, and the Guardians of Khana Dûm are going up against the Miners. Had it been the other way around, I would actually back the Legion to win that, especially seeing as the Guardians of Khana Dûm would be the ones sort of single file line going into them, although actually they're falling back here. All of these ladders are being set up, but ultimately it won't. Well, you actually can see the Barrow Wights are starting to fall away under the pressure of the arrow towers, so again, now that they're in range of the arrow towers, Muffins needs to move quickly. He needs to start overwhelming the outer defence, which is still relatively thin on the ground. You can see now that this Angmar army is starting to move, and I would imagine that the Umbar army is also following suit, albeit with just their ram. And interestingly enough, these Corsair Savages have been sort of caught on the siege towers. I don't know whether this was intentional. If it was, I imagine it was to try and preserve the life of the majority of this unit, which is an interesting thing to exploit if that was intentional, because people pushing this ram will not be killed because of the cover overhead, although the ram itself might end up being destroyed under continuous fire. But it is good to see that all of the forces are now moving into alongside Muffins, because it wouldn't have mattered how well Muffins did initially. If he didn't have any support, then his army would have been overwhelmed and destroyed. Now this is a bit of a mismatch over here. We can see that there are some Angmar Marauders facing off against the Harlanded infantry. But the Harlanded infantry, especially with the back of these arrow towers, are going to stomp these Angmar Marauders into the dirt. Muffins is continuing to be extremely aggressive, however, and this is good because... Thank you very much, announcer. But this is good because if he pushes forward, especially with the Blackwatch Legion through the gate immediately, this is still a relatively thin outer defence, and they do need to put up a defence in all the other places, the defenders. So it's not as if they can just gang up on Muffins, especially now. You can actually, having a look over here, we can see that there has been a sally out from the Ironfoot Hammer Guard from the Dwarves, and they are moving forward to try and deal with the Barrow Wights by the looks of things, which charging into the Barrow Wights is one of the ways to deal with them very effectively. You can actually see that there are some arrows being put into them as well. Now I'm not sure if I think the Hammer Guard don't have the highest charge. They do count as the units that it would be most prudent to compare them to would probably be something like the Witch Realm Inquisitors or the Haven Guard. That was a really inopportune moment for that movie to cut away, but the Barrow Wights did get charged into, and again they didn't get completely destroyed because I do believe the Hammer Guard have got a slightly lesser charge bonus on them, but they are still harassing this Angmar army, which is interesting to note considering this was the army which was clearly most scared about being harassed by cavalry. No archers by the looks of things either, so this cavalry is essentially free to harass these units out here as it sees fit, which is a big boon, especially if they can kill those Barrow Wights quickly, because these Barrow Wights over here are going to be shambling in through the gates. Meanwhile, these Harlanded infantry are just going to rip through these Angmar Marauders. Over here, I'm not sure why these units over here are waiting, because all they're doing is being shot slowly. Slowly but surely these units will be bled if they just remain stood here. Now, interestingly enough, the Witch Realm Pikemen are moving forward with the support of the Guardians of Khana Dûm.
Fight on! They must get no further.
Interesting so far. Now, the Barrow Wights will be able to do a decent job here because they're so difficult to get rid of. They won't kill off enemies quickly, but provided they're supported, they can keep this attack going for a long time. And the Dwarven player is going to be busy microing his Ironfoot Hammer Guard elsewhere, so actually these pole arms are out of place and they're going to need to get into position, leaving a bit of an area here for the attackers to push into and really make their presence felt with some some weight of numbers, especially if the Blackwatch Legion come forward as well. And indeed, it seems as though those grim tidings I mentioned earlier have come to bear. I really need to turn that announcer off. He's annoying the shit out of me. But the ram was destroyed by the arrow towers, so it is going to come down to the siege towers. Umbar is now moving forward in multiple places. And interestingly enough, sending up the pikemen onto the walls, that's a bit of a mistake. I mean, the pikes on the walls, they can't really get into formation on the wall. And that's going to really play into Umbar's hands. I mean, it is only just basic Corsair infantry that they're going to be fighting. But even so, you can't really afford to throw away a unit like this. This guy doesn't know when to shut the fuck up. Meanwhile, these Angmar Marauders are just sort of hanging out on top of the ladder, shouting insults at the dwarves beyond. What is going on over here though? This is where the epicenter of the action is happening thus far, and indeed, I'll just turn it down a little bit for a moment here. We can see that the Blackwatch Legion are in here. Unfortunately though, there wasn't really a need for them to push in because they had already done a lot of damage, and at this point the Blackwatch Legion are taking quite a lot of damage at the hands of the armor-piercing dwarven infantry. Having said that, over here they've had a little bit more success. They've barged the dwarves out the way, and this will allow units like the Barrow-wights and the Guardians of Kharndoom to consolidate this position. You can also see in the background there the long pikes from the Witch Realm pikemen, which again are going to be very, very useful here. Now the Blacklock Engineers are over here, but they don't have the best shot. I think this is a bit of a waste of the Blacklock Engineers even, because they could be absolutely invaluable late on, and honestly this is still not a catastrophe for the defenders. You know, they still have enough Dwarven and Linden infantry over here that Muffins could well burn out, so I don't really think that there's a real need to use the Blacklocks over here. But, you know, they will still be able to get a decent amount of kills on good infantry units as well. The Blackwatch Legion and the Guardians of Kharndoom are not a poor target to go after. Meanwhile, Abrazani Nadutari getting up onto the walls. It'll be interesting to see how this works. Now, the Mithlon pikemen have managed to get their pikes down, and they will be able to defeat this Corsair infantry over here. But they will also be attacked in the rear by the Nadutari. Now, the Nadutari are a primarily armor-piercing unit, which means they do have a low amount of base attack, which won't help them carve through these Mithlon pikemen quickly. But it should still be enough. Having said that, these Corsair infantrymen not actually drawing the fire of the 4 Linden Marines. That's a good bit of observation there from the Linden player. There's no need to utilise your javelins on a fight where you're actually having the best of it so far. Mithlon pikemen keeping the Nadutari at bay as well. They're also taking quite a lot of ranged fire, although the Narduzagar are coming in, and they should be able to turn the tide of this fight initially. Having said that, the reinforcements are so far away, and this is a mistake I see a lot of people make. I see a lot of people send up their first wave. Their first wave gets utterly crushed, but you need to apply continuous pressure to the defences, especially against the elves, who over time attrition can really hurt them, and you need to make the most of that. But Umbar, their reinforcements are simply too far away at this point in time. They need to be a little closer. Yes, they'll be taking fire from the arrow towers, but the price for not applying continuous pressure is far higher than the sort of low amount of casualties you'll take from the tower. The Rudar catapult is still firing away, and it looks as though Rudar are finally ready to move forward. Interestingly enough, they didn't bring any siege towers, which is something I neglected to mention earlier on. But they have blown a hole in the walls, so they will have multiple ways that they'll be able to get in. And they do have a lot of numbers as well, and they do have some Rudar Axemen, which are also hidden, so some additional AP, which will be useful against the Dalian force, which is waiting for them. Let's go and see how Muffins is getting on, however. His army has certainly taken the most casualties of all the attackers thus far. Guardians of Kharndoom up on the walls assist... Oh god, that frame rate is not enjoying the blobs over here. But the Guardians of Kharndoom are assisting the Angmar Marauders on the wall now, and this might be enough to sort of force back the Harlington infantry through sheer weight of numbers. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are out here as well. Now, interestingly enough, it looks as though the Ironfoot Hammer Guard is trying to disrupt Muffins' army now, considering that he has essentially penned in the army from Saucy Pants over here, and this is a real problem for the attackers. He needs to move in, you know, because he's essentially leaving his allies high and dry at this point in time. And now the Ironfoot Hammer Guard was going to go in and try and attack this Angmar force in the rear, but fortunately bringing the Witch Realm Inquisitors proved to be a bit of a godsend, because it will allow the Angmar army over here from Muffins to defend against this sort of thing. If they didn't have the Witch Realm Inquisitors, that Ironfoot Hammer Guard could honestly have destroyed the vast majority of this Angmar army with rear charges, which would have been a disaster. Although over here, Angmar have been making some inroads. We do have the Trolls of Gundabad. Now, several of them have fallen, but they are stopping the Blacklock Engineers from firing, and some of the Blacklock Engineers have also died off, but these Trolls of Gundabad, they are a little bit more fragile than the Trolls of Angmar, and they are starting to fall away, and the Blacklock Engineers are very good in melee as well, multiple HP, very good stats, so the Trolls will be falling away. But having said that, the lack of body-piercing projectiles over here is allowing Angmar to continue to move in. Obviously the Barrow Wights, very, very difficult to get rid of. They've largely circumvented the Dwarven Phalanx, and as a result of focusing on microing his cavalry outside the walls, the Dwarven player was not ready to move their forces into position to defend, and they are paying the price for it here, because these Ironfoot Halberds will be overwhelmed, they're out of position, and also with pikemen on hand as well, they're going to be outranged, so even if they were able to kill their way out of this with regards to the infantry, the pikes would still be sufficient, I would imagine, to finish them off. You can actually see over here, these Witch Realm pikemen, they're actually losing to the dwarves, but then they do have spearmen to push into the fight formation, so that's understandable. Over here we can see the Angmar Marauders are shaken, the Guardians of Khandu continuing to fight the Harlingen infantry. The Witchers are over here. They need to be careful not to get in range of the towers. That's one unit you really don't want to lose to the towers. But the Dwarven Miners are heading over here, as well as the Erebor Legion, to try and recharge this area. It's an interesting back and forth over here so far. I think it looks worse for the defenders than it really is, because Angmar is taking a lot of losses as they try and push through here. They're doing decent amounts of damage, but they really need to find a way of making this stick. Well, interesting engagement outside the walls there. The Ironfoot Hammer Guard were caught, and they are good, but in terms of pure melee, the Witch Realm Inquisitors have the beating of them there, and the Dwarven General has fallen. The Dwarves have got decent morale as it is, so that probably won't hurt them too much, and obviously in a siege, all of the defenders are just going to fall back to the town centre. Albeit, some of them might start perpetually routing, which would be a real shame. Now, we can see that it's probably going to be a good idea to keep it on half speed for the time being, as Rudauer have taken the Dalian defences a little bit by surprise, which is strange considering their points of attack are so close together. Earls of Escaroth and Barding Herd forming up another line, but there are a lot of Rudauer infantrymen in here, including the Ranadine Berserkers and the Rudauer Axemen, so there's a lot of AP floating around, as well as a lot of chaff in the shape of those Rudauer swordsmen. And I think the Dalian defence is in a lot more trouble over here than the defences elsewhere in the field. It's going to be very difficult for them to kill their way out of this, purely because of the level of troops that Rudauer have decided to commit here. Now, this is a large blob, and the Blackshot Dragon Slayers have come to the outer defence, so they've moved. And again, this is something that I'm not sure I entirely agree with. There are armies... Oh dear. This is not good. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers need to get the hell off this wall. But the AP projectiles are going to be less useful against Rudauer than they would be against the other armies. And I mean, he's also in danger of losing a huge amount of his unit here if the catapult gets like one more hit on this wall. It's going to cause several of them to die off. I think they've actually used up all their ammo though. I don't know how effective they've been. I've actually not noticed a lot of these players play before, at least not very often, so it's possible that they're fairly new. But having said that, Rudauer, a good attack here from Stewed Balrog. He's certainly someone I've noticed playing quite a lot. So again, the Barding Herd and the Earls of Escaroth usually are a very potent combination indeed, but against Rudauer have got the numbers and the damage types to deal with them. And these Ranadine Berserkers are throwing their axes all over the place. Now over here, the Swordmasters of Karnan should be sufficient to rip their way through this one unit of Rudauer swordsmen, but everywhere else, Dale is having a bit of a torrid time of it. These Bardian marksmen over here are essentially being left to try and deal with these hordes of axemen all on their lonesome. Meanwhile, let's go to an area where the defenders were doing pretty well earlier. And it looks like they've continued to do very well actually. Umbar's initial attack has been thrown off almost entirely. And at this point, Umbar might be best served actually waiting for a more opportune moment, because I don't think they have the numbers anymore. If they had been prepared to follow through immediately with some of the Castamir's Legion, and provided their ram hadn't been destroyed and they had a way of actually getting in easier than the siege towers, then it could have gone differently. But over here, This is potentially one of the areas where I would suggest waiting a little bit longer is required, but this does also mean that this Angmar force needs to move in. Unfortunately, they are now. There's a lot of orcs heading towards another place where Lyndon is the primary defender. So, slowly but surely, Muffins' front line is becoming a little bit more important. So some Snaga Stalkers are heading up onto the wall here to try and reinforce these Guardians of Khan Doom, who are actually being rear-attacked by these Dwarven Miners. Now, the Witch Realm Inquisitors are moving in through the gate. They need to be a little bit careful here, because if they charge into the halberds and the spears, they're going to have a bad time of it. I'm not sure where they can go here. They'd be much better off waiting, especially seeing as... Oh my word, look at that. That's the power of the Black Bloc Engineers, as they absolutely tear through that Angmar force. Now, a lot of them will get back up, but even so... Fortunately... Oh, look at that. That's absolutely vicious. However, fortunately for Angmar, these Barrow Wights will be able to take quite a lot of that on the chin. And they should be able to engage these Black Bloc Engineers in melee, which is sorely needed over here, because at this point the Engineers have managed to find the perfect angle, which previously they were shooting over the house, which wasn't really the best use of their time, but now they've got a perfect linear line of fire, which is going to be really, really bad. But the Black Bloc Engineers will be forced to retreat by the Barrow Wights, but the Barrow Wights will then immediately run into a force which they cannot hope to defeat in the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin and the Sons of Durin. That was a vicious attack from the Black Bloc Engineers. I have actually heard tell of an overpowered army composition from Erebor, which includes 2 units of Black Bloc Engineers, in spite of the cost increase. Some more Angmar Marauders moving in through the gate. At this point, Muffins has really got no choice other than to try and overwhelm the defenders. Despite the initial hardships, the dwarves have managed to somewhat stabilise, although they are still wavering in places. These Harland infantry are about to get rear-attacked by the Angmar Marauders. This will free up quite a lot of Angmar forces over here. Once again, the Erebor Legion having to go over here, but the attackers are having joy over here. Rudauer has certainly had the better of Dale in these initial encounters, which is good for the attackers, because they needed this somewhat, because they were having a really difficult time elsewhere. Umbar and the Angmar army in the south weren't doing too well. The Angmar army in the east wasn't really moving too fast, and that might cost them in the long run. Meanwhile, these Dalian marksmen still firing into the Franadine Berserkers, which is a good target, because they presumably have already done quite a lot of damage. And they've actually moved in over here now. They're rear-attacking these Earls of Esgaroth, who actually were holding. The Rudauer Axemen are AP, but they are very low skill, so the Earls of Esgaroth were going to have the better of them. I'm not sure whether that's still going to be the case with the Franadine Berserkers over here. We shall see. What's going on over here? The Rudauer Clansmen... Well, actually, no, these are the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, who have come down off the wall. They've pulled out their mighty anime swords. But the Atenmoor's Troll Hunters are preparing to get into position to presumably attempt to throw their armor-piercing javelins at them to try and finish them off. And the Dragon Slayers are going to scurry away. This probably is in the Dragon Slayers' best interest to just sort of try and retreat to the town centre at this point.
We must repel the invaders.
There's also some Lake Town infantry running through the streets over here, presumably to try and cover their retreat. Although at this point, this part of the Dalian defence over here has been utterly overwhelmed. These Earls of Esgaroth are not going to have the numbers left to defend. Meanwhile, over here, the Franadine pikemen are proving their worth, because they are holding the Swordmasters of Kharnan at arm's length for the most part. Also, there are a few axes being thrown in. The Swordmasters of Kharnan, however, victory still seems like a distinct possibility in spite of these odds, so it goes to show what a good tool Swordmaster units can be against Rudauer in a sustained melee.
We must repel the invaders.
This is where this Angmar force over here could become very, very important, because they need to make some substantial inroads here, because you would have to say that the army of Muffins over here has struggled a little bit so far, although the Hammer Guard are now inside the walls. They have had victory over here, but the question remains, have the losses been too substantial? Because they've taken a lot of casualties as they push through here. We shall see. Because over here, I mean, the dwarves are not really letting up, because they've committed their 2 strongest infantry units that they brought to the battle today to guard this choke point.
Let courage and skill at arms lead our way.
The Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin and the Sons of Durin. Some Snaga as well. The Snaga are not going to be sufficient, I would suggest, to defeat them. Now what's going on over here? Umbar are reigniting their attack by the looks of things. Indeed they are, the Abrazani. Interestingly enough, these Mithlon pikemen have been very good up on the walls so far. Mainly because they haven't had to deal with people pushing into their formation from the siege tower. They've managed to get their pikes down, and in this situation actually, based on the fact they've got several layers of pikes ready to fight, that would probably be pretty difficult to carve your way through. Putting pikes on the wall is still a risky endeavour, but even so, you can see over here that the Castamir's Legion, combination of those pikes keeping them arm's length, and the missile fire they're taking, and even they are having a hard time of it. Angmar is now also starting to attack. More Castamir's Legion. I mean, Umbar have had a very difficult time of it. But even still, I mean, their reinforcements are still a little bit too far away to be overly useful. Let's go and see how Rudar are getting on, because initially they were having a really good time of it. Over here, actually, Dale have had a slight victory. And now with the Dalian Marksman coming over here. But everywhere else, Rudauer have certainly had the better of it. You can see over here, still the Swordmaster of Kharnan refusing to give in, and still, you know, until the frontline Berserkers arrived on the scene, it looked like they were going to be victorious even. There are some Earls of Escaroth in the background over there, but they should probably think about falling back at this point. Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters, not really going to be necessary, I don't think, to take on the Lake Town Infantry, although I don't know. Lake Town Infantry is quite a similar unit to the Rudauer Swordsmen, all things considered, but you'd have to expect that the numbers of Rudauer would probably be enough at this point to wear down what's left of the Dalian defence. And this is an interesting conundrum for the defenders at this point, because they probably want to retreat all as one back to the town centre, as opposed to trying to hold individual streets, otherwise they could find pockets of their troops surrounded. Now the Witch Realm Hammerguard, this is a real clash of the titans happening in this street over here. Witch Realm Hammerguard up against the Sons of Durin would be a real rumble in and of itself, but the Dragon Slayer's presence here on the front line suggests that the Hammerguard are not going to win without support. There's a lot of routing troops over here, and actually the Erebor Legionnaires, or Legionaries I should say, have sort of attacked from the flank now over here, and there are Dwarven miners, so the initial forces that were up on the walls are now able to come in and surround what remains of Muffin's army. Now at this point in time I would ask where the Witchers are. If they've been caught in melee and slain, it would be a real loss. Guardians of Khan Doom. There is also the question of the Witch Realm Inquisitors, which presumably are still somewhere. Indeed, there are only 5 of them left, so their usefulness is questionable. Let's go and have a look over here at this Angmar force, however. And we have Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. They will lose to the Mithlon Swordmasters, especially with all the range fire that they're taking. They're not very good at taking range fire, lack of a shield. Their armour values are okay, but they're certainly nothing to write home about. Meanwhile, attacking through the gate, we have Guardians of Khan Doom, as well as a lot of fodder in those Snaga. It'll be interesting to see if the Pikes can keep their formation against the Guardians. Doesn't look like it. I mean, particularly seeing as some of these Snaga have managed to get in and around the defences. They will be slain quickly, but still the disorganisation that they're going to cause is certainly going to be in Angmar's favour here. Noldorin Guard up on the wall. Now, the Guardians of Khan Doom are good, but they're certainly not as good as the Noldorin Guard, especially with a bit of range support. There are some Scourge Raiders coming up. So again, the Elves are going to have to hold fast in the face of a lot of numbers. There are Barrow Wights over here, who have managed to sort of pen the Axe Guard of Erebor in, although it's a bit of a mess there. We'll have to see how that pans out. And there goes the general for Muffins. Muffins has certainly taken a lot of the sort of initial casualties on the chin here, but you would imagine that his army probably isn't going to last all that much longer. It looks as though the defenders are just going to have an outright victory over here, which is the danger. You know, the defenders were able to commit more resources over here because he was the only one that attacked quickly, and that may very well end up costing the attackers in the long run. If you're going to have a bombardment phase, you're going to have to agree that with your team. If you're going to all attack the fortress all at once, that's what you need to do. You can't have a pick and mix approach, otherwise the defenders, if they're well organised, they're going to be able to take advantage of that. An area in which the attackers have had a little bit more joy is over on Rudau's front over here. Now the Morroquendi bows are just finished slaughtering what's left of the Hranadine Berserkers that were over here. Now the Elves of Esgaroth did actually, well, they are actually holding their position, and interestingly enough we have sort of several surrounds on infantry. These pikes are surrounded by Elves of Esgaroth and Dalian marksmen, but then these Dalian marksmen are also surrounded by more pikemen, so it's a bit of a mess all things considered. And there are also Rudar forces which are around the flank, and in fact this is going to be the end for the Elves of Esgaroth because they are taking javelin fire in the back from the Etten Troll Hunters, so ultimately Dale's defence is going to crumble. And it'll be interesting to see how Rudar then approach this, because I don't think they would want to assault the town centre all on their lonesome. There's a lot of very elite troops in there and they only have one choke point to attack. Amusingly, they have got a unit of spearmen over here, Dale, which they're sort of leaving in reserve, I assume, to try and surround a potential Rudar attack. But once again, I mean, Umbar's attack has been very disjointed, and they've paid the price for it in droves. They've fallen, and Lyndon's forces have remained largely steadfast, to the point actually where Lyndon have reallocated their resources elsewhere. The ultimate insult, really, for the Umbar army here is the fact that Lyndon don't believe they need much resources to stop Umbar's attack anymore. And again, I feel as though Umbar's attack, being very wave-based, played right into Lyndon's hands, which is unfortunate, really. But over here, again, the defenders completely victorious against Muffins, and it doesn't look like Umbar are going to get very far either. Rudar are really the only army having great success so far, so we are now going to be having to rely on this Angmar army to really do some damage quickly in order to make the attackers have something to smile about at this point. Now the Trolls are here, and the Trolls should be able to deal some heavy damage to the pikemen, although the Mithlon Swordmasters might be able to deal some pretty hefty damage in return. These Noldorin Guard balance forces evenly matched. The Guardians of Kharn holding fast. A lot of these arrows are just sort of being ballooned up into the air, which does mean they're not really going to get the most damage done. Actually, the Axe Guard of Erebor killing the Barrow-wights, very impressive. The Barrow-wights aren't the most damaging unit, to be fair, so they do need support, and they were sent in all on their lonesome against one of the more attack-focused units that the forces of Erebor have brought. But even over here, I mean, the Trolls are doing a lot of damage to this front line at this point, and they are getting into the Forlinder Marines now. There are Barrow-wights down here, but even down here you can see Harlingen Guard. What's going on this wall over here? Well, the Witchrealm Scourge Raiders have held up pretty well to the Mithlon Swordmasters, all things considered, but what on earth was that? Ah, I see. So the Dwarven Catapult's coming in. That was a very nice hit as well. And that is going to be enough to rout some of the very depleted Snaga. Not a decisive blow, but over here I think they can see that the Linden defence is falling, so a bit of friendly fire wouldn't be the most devastating thing. And it is a nice blob for the Dwarven Catapult to try and target, and trying to thin out the attackers' numbers just that little bit more. Going to be important. Still some Angmar Halberds. Yeah, I think that the defenders have played this very well thus far. They haven't really made too many mistakes, all things considered. And that's important. I mean, a defending mistake, as I've said many times before, is so much more devastating for them than the attackers making a mistake. Even with the battle as it is, you would still suggest that the attackers have got a very good shot at winning it, purely because of the amount of numbers they can afford to lose. Now, Stewed Balrog is over here, but this, I think, is another mistake that he's potentially going to make, where if he just tries to attack the town centre here, his allies are in desperate need of assistance. Umbar especially is making no real progress here. What is that? Was that the Witches? That has to have been the Witches, right? Are they up on this wall? Yes, they were. The Witches managed to get one last shot off before the archers killed them. I mean, yeah, that's Muffin's army completely destroyed. That's a shame, because I think that the Witches over here on their own could have actually been the thing which helped Umbar get into the settlement. And they may very well at this point be able to overwhelm the Linden defence, but they're going to have very little left in the tank. I mean, they've got the Sentinels, they've got some Abrazani Nadubawi, the Naru Royal Guard, but really their army is in tatters and they won't be able to mount any serious pressure on the town centre. But really, Stewed Balrog, I think the Rudar forces need to support the one army left to him which can genuinely support him, and that's going to be this Angmar force here of Saucy Pants. And I don't know, I mean, you know, you can see these Axe Guard of Erebor coming in here. They're going to be dealing some pretty nasty damage to the Guardians of Khan Doom up on this wall. And if Rudauer just sort of tries to file into the town centre through that one entrance, it's going to go exceptionally badly for them, you would have to say. Especially considering that there's still Morroquendi pikes over here. They're trying to sort of skirmish down, but... And also now the Dwarven Catapult has turned around. And a few good hits might be all it takes. Having a look at what they've got left in the town centre as well. I mean, there's still 2 units of Wardens of Elos Tyrion with their ammunition, which leads me to believe the defenders are probably going to win this battle. Rangers, if they can get into the right position here, are going to absolutely massacre the attackers if they move into the right positions. There's Noldorin Blade Masters as well, which again, another multiple HP unit which can deal incredible amounts of damage. There's still the Black Locks, although I think they probably use most of their ammunition at this point, if not all of it. The Dragon Slayers are over here. What's left of the Sons of Durin will also be back here after the defeat of the Angmar army in the south. Very impressive display so far from the defenders there. And they were outnumbered as well.
They have lost half their men.
Goes to show that if you coordinate your army as well as the defenders, you do stand a very good chance in these situations where you're outnumbered. And also it goes to show the importance of coordination on the attackers' part as well. I mean, they do still have another unit of Witchers, which potentially is the sort of thing which can turn this battle in the attackers' favour. But you need to coordinate as the attackers. If you all set about doing different things, which I think all of them did. I mean, all of the attackers had a slightly different approach, although it was the one that Muffins took where he was very aggressive, but none of the others wanted to be that aggressive, you can tell. And the attackers may end up paying the ultimate price there for the lack of communication overall. Pikes are getting up onto the wall, although they're already in close melee with the Noldorin Guard and also with the Axe Guard. Slowly but surely, I think they might end up winning this, and Angmar indeed are going to break through this outer defence, but again, they aren't going to break through for free either, so only 2 genuine armies are going to get through. Umbar, they have some good elite units left, but I'm not entirely convinced that their army is in the best shape to continue this. There's still some Mithlon pikemen over here, and you can still see over here the Fallen archers just firing into the back of these Naruna Aru Royal Guard. Umbar's had a really, really rough time of it in this battle. But now back to the town centre. Centre of Dale. I mean, honestly, what's going on over here? Forodrum Javelins revealing themselves. The Dwarven Miners actually coming forward. Sacrificial Lamb to make sure that the Javelins cannot fire freely. But the Forodrum Javelin's another unit that can hide, of course. Again, multiple HP. Very strong. Similar to the Dunedain Troll Slayers. I mean, the attackers still do. I'm talking very defeatist tones over here, but the attackers do still stand a very good chance purely because they still have the numbers to really do some damage to the defenders. But if we have a look at the percentage of kills here, you can see that the defenders are still 10% ahead. Now, it's this point of the battle where it's usually key for the attackers. They usually start to bring it back quickly. But the key thing here, I think, is going to be the 2 units of Wardens of Elos Tyrion. I mean, as well as the fact they still have that high elven ballista, but the Rangers in particular are going to be so devastating if they get the right angles that it's going to be difficult to see how the attackers can deal with this. They are doing the right thing though, particularly the Angmar army. They're trying to sort of wrap up what's left of the defenders on the outer walls, making sure that the defenders can't get any more cost efficiency than they already have from their outer defence. And the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders are going to surround these Noldorin Guard and finally put them to the sword, or the axe, I suppose you could say. Again, these Axe Guard of Erebor, their AP damage proving very, very decisive. And now the Witches are moving forward. Now the Witches are really the joker in the pack here. You see what they can do. But Umbar, I mean, surely they're going to be able to force their way through at this point. The Naruna Aru Sentinels are moving forward. You do have the Castamir's Rangers as well, to give them credit, although the Castamir's Rangers, it looks as though they've taken a few losses. They've also got that ugly as sin mud texture on them. Ironfoot Crossbowmen. doing a lot of AP damage to those Naru Naaru Sentinels, thinning out their numbers, which they could potentially be an incredibly important unit. Now, interestingly enough, they do still have the Warlords of Umbar, but they'll have to find another gate or opening to get into, to actually get into the settlement, because of course they can't go up the siege towers, and this gate remains firmly closed. But a unit of knights, it would be interesting to see how that would work, because this will of course force the defenders to cover every avenue into the town centre. Otherwise the warlords would be able to recharge and win the battle for the attackers. So that unit of knights could still have a part to play. They might not necessarily get many kills, but they will still force the defenders to divide their forces, provided the Umbar player is paying attention. These Rudar forces moving away. But the Morroquendi pikes moving forward to engage. Wardens of Alos Tyrian have come forward to fire, and they are firing at the Rudar forces over here, specifically the Witch Realm Enslavers. Trying to bleed the attackers of their elite units is a good idea, actually, because even with the numbers, if it's all trash that the attackers have left, then the Noldorin Blade Masters, the Dalian Royal Guard, and all of those kinds of units will just so easily be able to stomp them into the ground. Meanwhile, with Rudar already mounting an assault on the town centre, again this is proving to be a bit disjointed. They really should be doing this at the same time. So Angmar needs to get their hustle on again, because otherwise they're going to be left behind, and once again they'll probably end up being the only army left on the field. Because Rudar, I think if this continues, they're probably going to struggle just a little bit. Especially considering there were those Dalian units which were left in the back. This unit of Dalian Spearmen, which is forcing Rudar to divide their attentions. The Dalian Spears probably won't get too far, particularly considering there is another unit on the way, which actually I think is... Well, actually there are some Black Wolves over here. But these Dalian Spearmen are forcing Rudar to divide their attentions, which again is a good move from the defenders. That Rudar catapult is still there, only 2 of them are there, and I don't think that means they can fire. I think they need 4 or 5 members left to actually operate the catapult. These Forager and Javelins are over here celebrating. Wardens of Alos Tyrian pulling back, conserving their ammo for a more promising target. And actually this High Elven Ballista is in a pretty lethal position, because it is going to dissuade Angmar from attacking. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's going on in Umbar's little world. It looks as though they have finally managed to defeat this outer defence, but they have very little left with which to mount an assault on the town centre. They're probably going to try and skirmish with the Abrazanim and the Castamir's Rangers, but only 17 Castamir's Rangers left. The towers on the walls have certainly proven to be very effective for the defenders. There's also the Naru Naaru Royal Guard, which they might still have some ammunition left, although there is very little of them left either. The time has come really for the warlords to try and do something. I think Rudar is probably going to need some support. That would probably be the best way in as well. They need to do something. Morroquendi bows still have ammunition, so I assume Dale is going to be all too happy to engage in this skirmish fight. Morroquendi bows, of course, should be able to defeat the Castamir's Rangers in particular in a skirmish fight. Now let's go and see what's happening over here, because Rudar have put a lot of stake. Well, they've got a lot at stake in this fight over here. And they are winning, I think, mainly because of the support of those Forager and Javelins, which is really causing a lot of damage to the Dalian front line, which pushed a little bit too far forward, allowing these Javelins to get a clean shot right along their line. And this is the sort of mistake which the defenders can't afford. It's really the only major mistake that I've seen the defenders make, other than arguably Dale trying to fight Rudar in the first place. But this is the sort of thing which could cost them the entire battle. There's very little margin for error when you're playing as a defender in this sort of situation. And allowing the attackers to get full value for money off of a unit like the Forager and Javelins is not going to stand them in good stead. Meanwhile, these Dalian Spearmen are going to be defeated ultimately. But they will put in a bit of work on these Ranadine pikes. Although these Dalian Spearmen are also about to be recharged by the Black Wolves, so they've done their job. But at this point, it's going to be close. I mean, you can see here that the attackers have already pulled it back to within 5% rather than 10%. Can they do it? Can the defenders hold on? You can see over here, Sons of Durin, Ironfoot Spears, Dragon Slayers. It's the sort of force that's... where have the warlords of Umbar disappeared to? Oh, I see, the gate has opened. Umbar captured the gate, and this means, of course, the warlords are now within the town, and this will mean that they will have to defend every choke point. There are also some crossbow corsairs up here as well, very bad in a skirmish fight. The Warden's Valos Tyrian would rip them apart if they got in range. The attackers have all they need to win this fight at this point, and that error over here, allowing the forage, or now the forage of javelins have seeped their way into the town centre, that might actually be a bit of...
Our men no longer command the city.
Jesus, calm down, man. Now this might actually be a bit of a mistake from Rudauer, because they are attacking without the support of their allies. You know, Angmar need to be attacking at the same time. So do Umbar. I mean, if Rudauer were going to try and do this, they needed to attack with the support of their allies, and it's possible actually that he sees the error of his ways, because he's pulling his Black Bolts and his Forage and Javelins back. Because if he allowed his forces to get massacred there, that would have been terrible for him. Now this catapult is wildly inaccurate from the dwarves, but it could still be the sort of thing which does a lot of damage. But now the attackers need to coordinate. You know, in the early game they paid the price for not acting as one, but if they all attack as one, well, at once I should say, they should win this at this point, I would imagine, because I don't think the defenders have got enough in terms of numbers to hold them back in terms of infantry. But Rudauer scared of that catapult, and again, if the defenders can prevent the attackers from being overtly aggressive, although Angmar's a very large force, I mean, Angmar probably at this point have got the scariest force. They've got a lot of Barrow Wights over there, they've got Guardians of Kharndoon, they've got the Witches somewhere in there as well. But High Elven Ballista, Wardens of Valos Tyrian, it certainly is going to be a Battle of the Somme type situation as these Angmar forces advance. That Ballista needs to fire quickly, however, otherwise it is going to find itself accosted in melee very, very quickly. Yeah, this Ballista, it's... there we go. Not the most kills here, although they are wavering, and indeed they break. Very important there, the Ballista is preserved. And at this point the dwarves are coming forward here, so they're going to try and overwhelm the attackers as they attack in their disjointed fashion. And again, this is the problem. The Angmar forces are advancing all on their own. I mean, Rudauer need to grab a hold of their balls here and move in. I mean, it doesn't really matter that the catapult's there. As the attackers, you need to attack as one. You need to put pressure on the defenders, and at this point, all throughout this battle, the attackers have really not done that to the extent they needed to. I mean, this is potentially the match winner, though. Umbar have had a horrid game so far, and it wasn't really... I mean, their initial tactics certainly didn't help them. But at this point, they have the chance to be the hero of the hour, because these Warlords of Umbar are going to be very difficult to stop. And they could deal the damage that is required. These crossbows, they're probably out of ammunition, so they're probably going to try and bog the Warlords down. I mean, at this point, it all comes down to cavalry micro, because they can deal the damage necessary. And it looks as though they've lost their nerve, and it looks as though they're going to pull back. It was a very tame charge, and at this point they're also taking crossbow fire, Dalian Royal Guard fire.
Something changes in the course of battle, but defeat seems almost certain.
Very poor. What's going on over here? Wardens of Valos Tyrian. Here we can see that Rudauer are now moving forward, which is good. You know, I thought that they were just going to leave Angmar to just hang Angmar out to dry. But as it is, these Witches are still lurking menacingly in the background. Now, the Witches will perform best as soon as the defenders are all engaged, but the problem that the Witches do have is that the defenders still have such an emphasis on their skirmish power. I mean, the Wardens of Valos Tyrian are exactly the sort of thing the Witches don't want to be seen by. Now this could be interesting over here. We have the Rudauer catapult sort of punching a hole in the line, the Blackwolds are fighting, but there are still the Erebor Legion and the Noldorin Blade Masters. Now the Noldorin Blade Masters are pretty much the pride and joy of the defending forces at this point. And Linden are rather perplexingly pulling them off of the front line. That was a shot from the ballista, tearing through yet more of the Angmar forces. Morale is going to be an issue here for the attackers. Angmar will not enjoy being attacked like this. There has got to be a way to turn these guys off. Meanwhile, Umbar are also moving forward. Where do those warlords go? There's a time to be aggressive, and it is now, because their allies need them to be aggressive, really. Nolder and Blademaster's defeat is almost a certainty. Well, there goes the Linden General. I think them turning their backs to the enemy was a huge mistake. The Nolder and Blademasters taking casualties is exactly the sort of thing you don't want to see. And now Rudauer are pouring in. And at this point, Rudauer could be the heroes, because if they can stop all of these defending skirmishers from firing, that could be exactly the sort of opening that the Warlords need. And indeed, the Warlords, I think they smell blood, because they're moving forward. I mean, the defenders did pull ahead a little bit more again. There are trolls though. Nolder in guard. The High Elven Ballista is still firing. This Angmar force is routing. Erebor Legionnaires. Sons of Durin. Well, that's which around Blackguard though. And now here comes the Warlords. This is it. This is the climax of the attack. If the defenders can weather this storm, then they will win. But if they can't, which it's going to be difficult to because Rudauer's pushed through, the defenders, it may well have been a horrendous mistake for those Nolder and Blademasters to turn their backs on the enemy because they took so much damage doing that. Those crossbow Corsairs though, hitting those black walls in the back, doing a lot of damage. The Dalian Royal Guard as well should be able to take advantage of the very limited black walls skill. Those Naranaru Sentinels are moving forward. There isn't a huge amount of them. And at this point you can see the defending skirmishers are just doing their best to try and damage control. The trolls are in here now though. They've stopped the ballista from firing, which was absolutely critical for the continued existence of the Angmar army, because a lot of their forces broke. I think they've only got one unit of Barrow Wights, the trolls and the witches left though, so it is going to be very, very, very close. But you can see... Ooh. I mean, these knights here could be the difference between success and failure.
The enemy general lies dead.
That's the Rudauer general. Rudauer are another faction which their morale is not fantastic. That's exactly the sort of thing. And the Nolder and Blademasters are now combining their forces with the Dalian Royal Guard. And it looks as though Rudauer's army is spent, but the confusion that they've caused could be enough for the attackers to win this. But I don't know. I think the defenders, they've managed to get their skirmishers free once more. And the Umbar player really needs to use these knights to their full effect at this point. But so far he's very ineffectually just nudging these units over here. You can see that that's not the sort of charge that is going to do damage. He needs to get them in, and he needs to get them into the Wardens of Elos Tyrian, because these Linden Rangers are just tearing Angmar's army to bits. Like, the Barrow Wights are just going to get ripped asunder. Where are the Witches? They've got to be over here somewhere, right? They are. But the Witches are in this blob over here, which, if the Wardens of Elos Tyrian notice that the Witches are in amongst the Barrow Wights, it's going to go exceedingly poorly for them. And it doesn't really matter because the Wardens are already targeting this area, so with the body piercing, by association they're going to win. And indeed, the announcer, Jesus, he doesn't know, he loves the sound of his own voice, doesn't he? But at this point the announcer has gained a little bit more confidence. The attackers are running out of steam. Only 4% of the attacking army remains. And despite a bit of a late resurgence, I don't know. I mean, the Witches are going to need to get a very telling shot. And I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to. I think that the Warlords of Umbar have been destroyed as well. Oh, there goes the Witches though. And they have destroyed this unit of Wardens of Elos Tyrian.
We have lost control of the city.
Oh no, don't put the Nolder and Blademasters in there. What are you doing? The Witches could prove to be the heroes of the hour, the heroes that the attackers needed. because those Wardens of Alos Tyrion, they've taken huge damage from the Witches. The Witches don't have much ammunition.
After them, cut the cowards down.
And there goes the Umbar General. The Warlords of Umbar were used incredibly poorly. And I have to say, Umbar's performance in this battle was not fantastic. If Umbar had been a little bit more put together, the attackers probably would have won this. I wouldn't want anyone to be too mean to him in the comments, however, because really the die was cast early on when he lost his ram and he had to rely on his siege towers. Because if you funnel into Linden through siege towers, you're always going to have a bad time. Meanwhile, over here, you can see the Naru Naaru Sentinels outnumbered by the Dalian Royal Guard. Also, the Sons of Durin are coming over here, Ironfoot Spears. And in spite of the late resurgence that those Witches offered, I don't think it's going to be enough. And the Crossbow Corsairs are routed. The Noldorin Blade Masters, obviously going to be too much for them. And yeah, at this point I think that the defenders have probably got this in the bag. Another shot coming in there from the Witches, cooking some of those Dragon Slayers. Oh, hello. And in fact, that unit of Dragon Slayers might have just been almost entirely wiped out by the Witches. They still have ammunition as well. I mean, what are they going for now? The Wardens of Alos Tyrion, again, another nice target. The Linden Rangers, again, I think they did certainly prove to be the cornerstone of this final defence, but they have paid for it dearly because the Witches have boiled most of them. The Dwarven Catapult is still operational. Still some Erebor Legionaries. Oof. This could be the end for them. What have Umbar got left? Umbar may very well prove to be the last army left alive. The Castamir's Rangers are still firing. They still have some Abrazani Nadubawib. And back in... well, the Corsairs are running away, but... yeah. This is going to be it. Still some Barrow Whites left alive, but... this was a very good battle. Very back and forth. Very enjoyable to watch, actually, as well. And it's very rare, actually, that a defending force which is outnumbered wins this fight. And admittedly, the attackers made some mistakes, but the defending army made very few mistakes. I think over here, when Rudauer barged through, it was really in this area of the field where the defenders made their only mistakes, but they didn't prove to be big enough for them to lose this battle. There goes the Angmar General, the Witches, finally being set upon and destroyed, but the well, at least the Angmar Witches from Saucy Pants' army can hold their heads high, because they certainly got a lot of good kills. Muffins was quite unfortunate. He attacked very quickly, and he had to deal with the full fury of the Blacklock Engineers as well as some of the Dwarven elites. But yeah, very, very good synergy, I think, here between the defending armies. They had all that they needed, and they played very well together as well. And this is going to be it, the final 1,000 frames. And it's just going to be a case, really, of hunting down this this final Umbar force over here, which we may as well go into ×2 speed for. The Dalian Royal Guard are going to lead the way in defence of their own city, and it holds. They are victorious. There's also, well, the Noldorin Blade Master's still in here as well. Wardens of Alos Tyrion.
Look how our cowardly foe runs. It is time to press the attack.
Very good. I would say all of the defending armies deserve an equal amount of credit here, because they all played very, very well. The Dwarves were aggressive in their defence at the start, and I think that proved to be very well played by them for helping to deal with Muffin's army, harassing the other Angmar army of Saucy Pants into not advancing quickly. And then, of course, Dale probably had the most difficult time of it as far as the defenders go, but then they were in a bit of a matchup where Rudauer, they can make Dale hurt with a lot of their AP, and overall I think Dale still did pretty well considering the hand they were dealt. Dwarves getting the most kills, but again they did face a lot of Angmar forces initially. The Angmar force which went a little bit more for quantity rather than... well, actually no, Saucy Pants had more forces, but Muffins was definitely more aggressive. Umbar, of course, very, very torrid time of it, only 656 kills. A few mistakes made there, but I feel as though, as far as the attackers go, probably Stewed Balrog deserves the most credit because he did make the most inroads early on, did well against Dale, and then he also, potentially, that push that he made into the town centre was almost enough, but ultimately I feel as though the Warlords of Umbar didn't do the job that they needed to do in order to make that stick. Having a look at the kills that the Dwarves made, and again, 500 kills on those Axe Guard of Erebor, that's very impressive for a unit of shock infantry. Moving throughout, again, Blacklock Engineers with 286 kills, that body-piercing, armour-piercing projectiles, very strong of course. Ironfoot Hammer Guard proved to be important. They may not have got a huge amount of kills, considering they are very expensive, but they did also force the Angmar advance to be a little bit more staggered, and that ultimately cost the defenders more in the long run. Good spread of kills. The Catapult not getting the most kills, but it's a scary thing to behold, and I think ultimately it did force Rudauer and Angmar to think twice. And the fear it caused in the minds of the players is often more effective than how good the Dwarven Catapult actually is. So yeah, I think this was a very good battle. Big thanks to Masterblast for sending it in. It is also worth mentioning that Stewed Balrog also sent it in to me, so if I'd used his version, the blue team attackers would have lost, which I'm sure would have made everyone very happy. But as it is, it's fine. So multiple people sent this one to me, but very good battle, and I'm glad to have shown it. Next, I do have actually a Siege of the Grey Havens in the pipeline, but I'll probably save that till later on next week. I also have a few more. I have quite an odd free-for-all actually, which might be interesting to show, and hopefully at some point next week I'll also be able to showcase the new thing that I want to start doing. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.